Greetings and welcome to Talk a Little, Learn a Lot, the American Society of Naval Engineers podcast. I am your host, Stephen Phillips. In this podcast, we talk a little and learn a lot about naval engineering while inspiring the next generation of STEM professionals. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Michael Briscoe, ASNE's Educator in Residence, to discuss Promoting Electrical Propulsion Workforce Development Program, hosting its national competition for 2025, commonly referred to as PEP 25, of which he is the event coordinator. Mike, thanks for joining me today on the podcast. Would you briefly introduce yourself to the listeners?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I've been with ASNE for 7 or 8 years now. I started with the Fleet program that we still manage, which is a free video game that kind of entices and inspires that K-12 audience to be part of our naval engineering, our STEM community. And starting in 2018, we hosted the first PEP program. Dr. McHugh and Dr. Russell from ONR spearheaded that work. And for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been managing the growth of the program, attracting new schools, and then just trying to connect our pipeline all the way together. So our K-12 efforts with our PEP program, our PEP program with our recruiters, and growing our naval engineering community.
Well, let's unpack what PEP is in more detail. Can you give us the basics, the who, what, when, where, and why of PEP 25?
Sure. So we're talking because we're excited about the national competition, April 15th to the 17th at First Landing State Park in Virginia Beach, Virginia. But I would encourage everyone to think that PEP happens year round, that we have teams that are working on boats through the summer, both semesters of their school, looking for jobs year round, looking for internships. And I think we want to talk about both sides of the coin for the program of building the boats and racing the boats, but also developing a strong workforce and making sure that workforce ends up and staying in our community. Um, and so that's kind of the why. As much as we want to have great competitions, award trophies, and set records, and we'll speak to that today, we want to make sure that each of these students ends up in interesting internships, finds the right career paths, gets this hands-on learning so they're not showing up at workplaces and needing 6 months of training, but really have been in workspaces, labs, using high technology, working with fabricators of different types so that they can really join the workforce and make big impact right away. Along those lines, there's a few events that we're trying to set up through the summer, and I think big picture, we're just looking to have more and more PEP events. So up until now, it has been an annual competition, but we'll be hosting an event in Marionette, Wisconsin, June 7th and 8th. I know that our Yukon team is very excited to head down and participate in the APBA event in Alabama in August, and we'll be partnering with some friends through Build Submarines down there. And even the Princeton electric speedboating team is putting together another world record run with some competitors, and maybe May, maybe early June. But again, there's a lot of opportunity for our community and just really interested students to come out and join us throughout the year. And all this stuff will be up to date on our webpage, navalengineers.org/PEP.
Now, ASNE manages the program, which is funded by ONR, the Office of Naval Research. How do the two organizations collaborate to support and grow the PEP community?
Yeah, I think that our partners at ONR are tremendous. They judge the papers, they watch the videos that students present. They ensure that we have 6 support craft from Little Creek in the water, so we can have these students taking their crewed and uncrewed boats out and about. Um, so in addition to obviously funding the program, they're integral partners that are along with us each step of the way, designing each aspect of the competition, making sure that we tweak the rules from year to year, so that we're trying to make sure students are getting the skills that they desire. So for example, over the summer we introduced a rule that the boats should carry 60 pounds of payload or at least 30 pounds of payload to make sure that we're developing craft that are more in line with what the Navy's seen, even in the USV field. Um, so they really help us stay, they do, help us with the day-to-day logistics and the overall vision. In addition, we are partnering with many groups. We work with recruiters from a number of organizations to make sure our students are finding the right kinds of jobs and internships. On the Navy side, that includes the NREIP program, the internship program, and connecting with different workforce development organizations, especially build submarines. We encourage students to upload their resume to buildsubmarines.com so that they can get weekly updates on jobs that are interesting in their field. And they have become an active partner, and we're looking at the fact that they will most likely be supporting the industry reception on Wednesday, April 16th from 4 to 6 p.m. at the Hilton Garden Inn. And it's this kind of like growing community of support that makes everything that ONR has invested so much into, time and effort wise, continue to grow into the future. And it allows us to find new partners like the American Powerboat Association, who have 130 events across the year. And we are leaning on them to help us allow some of our boats to race in more open classes, so that they can show off all that they are doing in their workspaces as well.
Mike, I'm interested. How many PEP competitions have there been to date, and what milestones have been accomplished so far through this competition?
So we hosted one in 2018 that had two industry boats, and then we were on target to host one in 2020. And then after we figured out how to manage ourselves through the pandemic, we've hosted four. And so we had a collegiate PEP at the Coast Guard Yard in 2021. We had one at Pohick Bay in 2022, and then we've been down in the Tidewater area for the last couple of years. And that support from the Virginia Beach Naval group has been really critical for us to grow from. We had 8 universities on site at the Coast Guard Yard in 2021, and we had 43 boats on hand for PEP 24, across about 35 universities. And looking ahead, we're pretty excited to continue growing the number of schools that are in the program, and have some plans both with our current partners and a growing number of partners to increase the number of universities participating in the future PEP events, possibly even introducing an additional PEP competition on the West Coast each year.
What are the basic rules and rubrics for PEP 25?
So we keep them on our website, and you can always go to the navalengineers.org/PEP and find the rules on the first page and in the tab for the current competition. Overall, we have fewer rules than most competitions. You can see everything from an electric jet ski to an uncrewed catamaran to a trimaran that used to be a sailboat that's been retrofitted with batteries. Our main rule is that it has to be electric powered. This year, we have capped that at 55.5 volts. So we are trying to focus on efficient use of essentially a 48-volt system with a little bit of wiggle room. Students have to have some safety features on board, everything from kill switches and coding receivers to make sure that they're able to turn off as needed, to having the safety equipment for crewed vessels that are necessary for basic Coast Guard regulations and just for common sense safety regulations. The payload this year is making the uncrewed boats a bit longer, but there's no minimum length or maximum length. The only thing that really restricts the complexity of the craft is they have to launch in 5 minutes from the boat ramp. So that seems like a kind of a small rule, but you have to be able to wheel it in, get it in the water, and get it out to the course in 300 seconds. So it can't be something that is needing to be assembled right there on the dock. It's got to be like a good cohesive craft that's been well designed.
Well, Mike, you alluded to this. There's several different categories and prizes in PEP 25. Can you break down some of those for us?
Yeah, I'll break down what we have going on this year and the direction that we're going to. We have an uncrewed class, and so there's first, second, and third prize money. All that money goes back to the university, not to the students, which is always a sad moment. But last year, the uncrewed class had 27 boats. So I think, down the road, we'll be looking to be able to break that up into smaller divisions. We'll talk a little bit about the technology that teams are exploring right now. But as certain technologies get more mastered, that opens up the opportunity for us to open up more classes. On the crewed side, we have planning and displacement, which again have first, second, and third prizes. Uh, whether the hull is planning or displacement obviously depends a lot on speed. So there's a lot of discussion with the teams about which group they're going to fit into, rather than a clean break from a naval engineer's perspective. And in addition, the Office of Naval Research asked us to look into propeller design. So we're offering a certificate this year for excellent research into propellers, which probably will include some data gathering and some consideration of some very different designs. And we've seen that work happening in the field already, where everything from a toroidal design to how many fins is the right way and what's the right pitch for operating these motors. Because these motors can go up to 18,000 RPMs, it has a different power profile than what we see in traditional gas motors, even at this size. And there'll be a couple other special awards. We had a generous donation from Optima Battery about with some marine batteries. And so we're going to celebrate the team that was most able to leverage the marine batteries to get around the course. And keep an eye out for top paper, top video, and I think the way that we set up the rubric overall, the on water performance tends to determine who finishes first and second, with 60 total points out of 100 coming from the on water performance. So all that will still be in line. And in addition to the actual certificates, I think the one thing that we go around and talk with the teams about is the biggest reward is that we keep an individual page for each school on our website. So navalengineers.org/Alabama, navalengineers.org/Auburn/ATU for Arkansas Tech. So all these schools, all these competitors can put a bullet on their resume. I was, PEP competitor 2025. See my work at navalengineers.org/UConn. Down the road, what we're doing as these teams compete year after year is creating a bookmark on those pages so they can continue to have a direct link to show recruiters a visual of what they accomplished in this race, because the end goal is the job, right? And so what we want them to be able to do is not take up too much real estate on their resume, but be able to show in one click a 1,000-word picture, right? That shows exactly what they've been able to knock out. And each year we'll add new teams, but this year, navalengineers.org/Tennessee #2025 will always be where the University of Tennessee students can reference that their great work is being displayed on our website. And it's the certificate of achievement that we work hard to document through May and June using our drone photography to make sure each individual student's getting that great documentation for their future work placement.
That really seems like a great way for a student looking for life after school as they're looking for employment to really set themselves apart. So that's great. I like that feature. Describe for us what the student teams submit and then how these components will support their career paths beyond.
Sure. So we asked for a white paper where they, over 15 pages, describe their documentation. This year, we tweaked that white paper rubric to focus more on the design steps, which I think is, has a good also benefit of spreading out the work of writing the white paper, where a lot of the teams are able to write in December and kind of cover that basis so that they can focus a lot more on the testing and design and the fabrication right now. For the video, we are not asking for anything that looks like The Godfather Part 1 or 2, maybe Part 3. We asked them to kind of just point at the boat and show us how they're addressing the different aspects of the rubric, and make sure that they're explaining how they meet all the safety guidelines. The O&R judges are able to look at those before we show up on race day. They are able to score those, and we have those scores available. And that means that they can also ask questions in the parking lot that are more direct. We can get past the overview piece, and while we're looking at the qualification steps on the first day of each race category, the O&R judges can say, hey, I watched your video. I know your boat. I was really curious about how you researched X, why you decided Y, or how you actually implemented Z. And so it allows this conversation between Carter Rock, Naval X, all the groups that are supporting us to get really into the weeds with these students right away and really show to get to the heart of the conversation they want to have with students. And then like I mentioned before, that on water race category is 3 times greater than either the paper, the video, and points wise. So we are really are we are rewarding high speed, high reliability craft at its heart. That's what the scoring is designed to do.
And that's the most fun, I'm sure, of the whole process, right?
Yeah, and what's interesting too, so the uncrewed boats go 2 miles and the crewed boats go 5 miles, which is a reliability contest. If you can, hit the quarter-mile track and go real fast, that's fine, but the Navy's looking for reliable craft. So we're asking these boats to actually put in some real distance. And so that kind of like testing, hardening phase of build is the thing that differentiates between first and fourth most often. And so we really encourage students to take the time to make sure that they're not putting a prototype out there, but really a hardened 2.0 version of their vehicle.
Mike, you've mentioned some of them, of course, but I'm interested. Who is participating this year? Who are some of the contestants?
We've got a lot of schools coming down, and it's going to be a great event. Furthest away, we're visiting it with our teams in the Midwest. So we've got Madison College coming with Iowa and Illinois. They all have really made some interesting uncrewed designs. Texas A&M similarly has a great uncrewed design that they'll be bringing and traveling quite a distance to make sure they're coming to Virginia Beach. But what's been really great is looking at how some of these communities that have been competing against each other, like in the SEC, we've got Georgia and Tennessee and Alabama and Auburn. Um, and they're all bringing craft to, see how they can operate in the water against each other, in addition to how they operate on the other athletic fields. The schools from Florida have a series of uncrewed boats. FAU's working on a design. The College of the Florida Keys, as well as the University of Central Florida, which hosts the Robotics Club of Central Florida, all have very interesting uncrewed designs. And then our crewed boats are coming from a lot of our schools are a little bit closer. Princeton's been in this space for a long time, going back to when they put their boat in the water at the Coast Guard yard. And Washington College has a couple boats. Um, Stevens and Tennessee are looking at bringing some nice manned boats as well. So we have a good number of schools from a wide variety of places. Just last week I went and visited our teams in the Northeast. So I stopped by Delaware and Stevens and Stony Brook and URI and Yukon and Buffalo. And I rattle those off just to say we're really in the communities east of the Mississippi for the most part, developing talent that I hope our companies take advantage of. That we are in your backyard. We have students that are working on your problems. They would love to take internships at your place. If you've got in-kind donations, if you've got the right battery to share or the right wiring or any kind of motors that you all are developing, all that kind of stuff, that work is being able to be showcased at this event and by schools in your backyard. And that's why these partnerships with things like the American Powerboat Association, where we can have more events in schools' backyards, can like help make us in your community more loudly.
Are there any designs or approaches that some of the teams are employing that we should make sure to watch?
Yeah, I think we had a presentation for the International Hydrofoil Society, which hosts the Mandel Prize, which is a paper writing competition about foils. And we have at least 4 teams that I'm aware of that are going after foiling designs very directly right now. We've had a couple teams look at this before. There's a level of complexity that's very challenging that requires a lot of on-water testing. But I think we'll be able to see some interesting foil designs, and I think down the road that could be a class. We also have more than ever, we've got 3 schools that have autonomous systems that seem very capable of actually executing the course autonomously. We haven't had any group run autonomously on the day of the race yet. But again, this might end up being a class that we look into starting and separating out from the general uncrewed category. If you look at some of the videos that we put out, Wisconsin's boat last year and Howard's boat last year were full-size fishing boats that ran on remote control. Both had battery packs about 100 pounds or more, which were showing that they they probably could have shed a little bit of weight there, but they made something that had real power. And so I think like this kind of full size 12-foot boat, uncrewed, remote controlled, able to be pretty hefty in the water is the overall direction of where we're going. I'm not sure we'll see any boats shorter than 5 feet this year, even on the uncrewed side. And so there could be some categories down the road that kind of look at that as well, whether we are having a standard hull and letting students focus on the electric propulsion system, or tightening up the budget categories and seeing who could do the most with the least amount of money. There's kind of those kind of directions where we're going as teams have found some successes in their designs. And we're kind of seeking that feedback from the students this year too.
We've heard that the crewed and uncrewed categories have different courses and different expectations. Is there anything else that you expect to see from each of those categories this year?
Well, I think the big part is just kind of the flow of the event. So last year we had everything in one day, which was taxing for everyone involved. And now we've spread out to 3 days. So the crewed boats are actually showing up on April 15th and doing their qualifying then. But that's a group of about 10 craft, we think. It's a smaller group. When they go out and race on Wednesday, April 16th, they will be doing 5 laps on our half-mile courses. And they hopefully we'll get great weather. We like where we are in Broad Bay. There's only one place one direction where the wind can come out of that really gives us chop. So, we're hoping that they can operate smoothly. On the uncrewed side, I think this is hopefully the last year where we have this, but we've got almost 30 boats running this year. It's just a tremendous amount of interest in either remote controlled or autonomous operation, but designing these kind of craft that can have onboard sensors that let you know everything that's going on with the craft while operating at higher and higher speeds. I think the standing record is still 17 minutes and change from Texas A&M and Pohick Bay. I wouldn't be surprised if that record takes a significant cut this year. We've got a lot of teams that are very professionally attacking the speed record to the point where, I'm encouraging William and Mary to not only race in our race, but go to an APBA event to show just how fast they've designed an uncrewed boat. And, it's just tremendous movement ahead as some of these teams got their feet under them in the first year that they were in the program. The second year, they can really build on a more stable platform. And so what we're starting to see is the uncrewed group catch up to the crewed group as far as speed on the water.
Clearly, this event, indeed the whole program, seeks to connect students to both internships and then eventually employment. You talked about the website. What else can you share about how that aspect of the program works, and maybe give us an example of a success story?
Sure. So, most directly, we have a few high volume activities that are going on right now. For every student in PEP that doesn't have an internship or a job and would like to get more connected to our industry, we're putting their LinkedIn page and or resume at the top of their individual pages. We will be bringing that and linking to that throughout the event, but also highlighting those pages on our PEP Workforce Development LinkedIn page and pushing that information out there so that as recruiters are looking to fill the remaining internships that are out there, with the remaining jobs that need to be filled with entry-level employees, we have a lot of great students that are still looking for work. And so we're doing some of that matchmaking actively. We're also still in the midst of recruiting recruiters, which is always fun, but we'd love to see more recruiters at our industry event Wednesday, 4 to 6 p.m. We'll have a lot of great food and beverage there, and would love to help do some matchmaking job-wise during the PEP event, and probably look to grow that aspect of more common job fair type days and events that we have linking the PEP community. And the other thing that I'd say big picture is that we work with everyone individually, and I go around and I meet with the teams individually, and the last thing I say to them is, I have a lot of time. You can always call me for 15 minutes or whatever, and we just talk through what you're looking for. I can share some people that are hiring in our community and start to make those contacts. And as they take advantage of that, sometimes we're able to place students more directly, and sometimes we just get happy happenstances. yesterday was the Virginia Digital Shipbuilding Challenge competition at VMask, hosted by Old Dominion University. And some of our great members, our leaders in some of those organizations, were kind of directly leading the work there. And it was great because I got to see a PEP graduate there. Janaya was on the Howard team last year. Their boat, like I mentioned before, was high powered, remote controlled, and we actually had the it was fortunate for me, unfortunate for her, but I got to pick their brains for 3 hours while we were stuck on 95, picking up their boat in Fredericksburg and driving it up to Howard University using my truck. And she was able to find her own job, but it ended up with being with Tridentis, which, you know, a lot of people in our community know is a extremely high quality organization doing a lot of great work these days, getting new work that's very exciting. And she was at the digital shipbuilding competition talking to high schoolers, trying to help them find their career paths. And you look at that and you have that moment where you're like, this is the full cycle, this is the pipeline that we're really trying to develop. And I hope that we're able to keep placing students in those types of positions so that way they stay in our industry. Because quite frankly, the competition's fierce. A lot of our strongest students do get picked up by Tesla and SpaceX, by other types of STEM leaders in other fields pretty early, and we need to make sure that we're keeping an eye on keeping our talent within our ecosystem.
Mike, the event is approaching quickly. And I know, as you said, you're visiting all these students as they're getting ready for the race. What advice are you giving the teams as the race approaches?
So the fun part in visiting 40 schools is it's exhausting. And so I try to spread out as much as possible. So in November and December, I'm saying you got to wrap up your design. You got to start getting pieces. And really the kind of the milestone I tell teams to have is either figure out their whole hull or the electric propulsion system running on a benchtop by the time they leave for their fall semester. And that's an aggressive timeline, but they should be finishing fabrication by President's Day weekend, and they should be testing and iterating through late February and March. And like I said, I was just visiting Buffalo last week. A lot of ice on those waters still. So some schools have a little bit easier time with that than others, but we have to be in the water as soon as possible because this is not only electrical engineering, it's not only mechanical engineering, it's not only naval engineering, it's truly systems engineering. And as they waterproof their systems, they build up heat. As they vent their heat, they get water intrusion where they don't want it. And all that is kind of pushing them also to find out this thing, which we remember back to when we were 2021. Sometimes you can't go as fast as you want to. You can't go full speed. You can't put the pedal to the metal, but you can't find out those standard operating procedures. You can't figure out as a team how you want to run the race that you're looking for without a lot of time on the water. Because quite frankly, you know, if we're looking at the end of March, that's when I tell every team in the world to stop testing hard, start treating it like a baby, start figuring out, you know, what you can do to make sure you get as much distance down if you have any questions about whether your craft can make it, and then doing some of the ancillary things that can make things really go well for you. You can add wiring harnesses, you can, you know, strengthen connectors, you can do more battery testing to see really about your drawdown rates. But we've definitely had teams that have not been able to compete because they had two speed controller system and burned up ESCs to the point where they only had one left. And so at this point, we're also telling teams to start to be careful that their testing needs to look at their supplies and their supply chains to make sure that if they break anything that they can replace it in time. So we kind of try to manage the expectations of the work throughout the year. Like every project for any ageist person, right? You always feel like you're a little bit behind, and if you only had a little bit more time, a little bit more money, but there is no more time. There's probably no more money, and so, you know, this is a real, real engineering challenge, and we're excited to see what they bring April 15th, 16th, and 17th. But hopefully everyone that's hearing this has already done their hardcore tests, already run their simulated race, and is really in the kind of mode of I need to protect this thing to get through my 2 miles for uncrewed and 5 miles for crewed.
No surprise, it's too late to sign up for the event this year. But as you said, this is a program, right? And it's going to be back again next year. So for those who are interested in preparing for PEP 26, do you have any advice for those students?
if it's possible, come. And I was speaking with people yesterday and was telling them the same thing. That having come to the parking lot, you're going to be so impressed by the energy and the hard work of the students. And you'll also, as future competitors, be able to see all the designs that are out there. And you can, when you start with a clean sheet, that can be a little bit paralyzing. You can kind of get a feel for what makes sense for your school. I think when we onboard new schools in August and September, the first thing that we tell them to do is look at Facebook Marketplace, look at what halls are laying around in their community that they can take advantage of, and you can kind of start that work on the race day. If you can't come, we're gonna have an amazing drone photographer. We might be able to broadcast some of that live. I'm not sure yet, but if nothing else, we'll have a ton of those videos online. In addition, we have on navalengineers.org/PEP on the right side of the page is a PDF that's 132 pages that summarizes the white papers from last year, and we will recreate that in May and June this year. And that kind of gives a synopsis of the types of research that students engage with. Those papers tend to be in the beginning. The types of fabrication steps that are necessary, from laying up fiberglass to machining metal hulls. Those are tend to be in the middle. And then the testing and other types of ways that students really hone their craft in at the very end. And so that kind of documentation is also worth a good review of. And as we start getting all the drone footage up in each of the pages, if you're really interested in one design, you'll be able to see it operate in the water from a lot of different angles. And that can kind of help give you clarity about some of the things that were strong about that design and some of the ways that you could improve upon it. And I guess, getting back to the if a school is interested in joining, the other important step is just to email me. education@navalengineers.org. Shoot us an email, let us know that you're thinking about it. I've already talked with 3 teams that will probably be joining us next year. And we're really excited to kind of set aside the money to make sure we can fund them, keep engaged with some of the energy that we can send their way. If there is any internships that we can line up in the short term, do that connection. But also the nice thing about it, being ASNE that manages this, we can invite you to conferences like ISS in Philly. That's free for all undergrads. FMMS in September in San Diego, free for all undergrads. So we can start to connect you to the community already. And those can kind of identify the suppliers and mentors that can really help you get from idea on the page to boat in the water much more quickly. So please do reach out, education@navalengineers.org.
Is there anything else that you would like to share with the Talk a Little, Learn a Lot audience?
I guess just an invitation. We're going to be in Virginia Beach in April. We'd love to see everyone there. And if you're down in that Tidewater area around that time, it's great to stop by. But we have this active Discord, which is where students kind of just chat amongst each other. So no matter where you are in the country, and I got to be honest, especially if you're remote, especially if you're up working somewhere and there's just not a lot of people talking about the electric ideas that you have or how to propel a boat, how to work a USV, come join our Discord. I can tell you, for better or worse, it is active on a Friday night. We have a very talkative community. That goes for recruiters as well. We're always putting jobs in there, but if you directly put them in there, God bless. We'd love to connect you directly with our group that way. And if something more structured like a job talk would be great, we can set up those webinars. And, I think the direction overall that we're going is bringing PEP out to the community. We kind of grew something really strong from 8 universities and 60-ish kids in 2021 to I think we count up about 490 student engineers in the program right now, spread across 40 universities, and they're all coming to Virginia Beach. But what we want to do is start bringing that energy back out. So we're going to Wisconsin in June. We might go to the Mystic Wooden Boat Festival just to show off the wooden craft that our teams in the Northeast have been doing great. Finding more events with the American Powerboat Association that we can do more locally. And that's where we start to really develop the pipeline where we got 16 and 17-year-olds being blown away. And, they're not going to be blown away by an old dude like me. They're going to be blown away by a 20-year-old that made their own boat and can race it around in the lake, right? Everyone wants to see a near peer like that. And so we've got 40 universities worth of that. We're growing clubs at a number of schools, and we're trying to push as many of our senior design teams into clubs so that we can again get into the freshmen and sophomores. not only to keep them inspired while they're taking courses that can be a little bit dry, like physics and calculus, 202, but also get them some hands-on learning so that they can take some internships and get some jobs that show that they're able to actually fabricate the thing that they're imagining, and work with people that are in those roles and not give them impossible tasks. So, I think the more that we come back to your community, if you see a PEP, you know, sticker, event, boat, say hey, say that you're rooting for these kids, that if there's anything that you can do to help them along their career journey, let them know. And we just look forward to seeing you. And if you are, a good alumni of a certain school and want to support us to get over there or strengthen a club or work there, I'm visiting the schools each year. Happy to make those introductions, happy to meet with the teams together and kind of connect you as a unfair advantage for your favorite school, because every school should have their own unfair advantages, and we can just see how it all plays out each April in the national competition. So the last thing I'd just like to say is, please do come out, please join us, and I really appreciate the time talking with you today about this.
Well, thank you, Michael. It is going to be a great event. And so, thank you, Dr. Michael Briscoe, ASNE's educator in residence, for taking this time to discuss promoting electric propulsion workforce development 2025. And of course, Mike, I know that we're going to have you at some point back on the show in the future on Talk a Little, Learn a Lot, the podcast of the American Society of Naval Engineers.
Thanks so much, Stephen. Really appreciate your time today, your audience's time. And we really are excited to share this energy, this youthful energy, with your listeners and with the ASNE community altogether.